Joan said that no matter what we do, the socket is too tight, where it's cutting off the circulation, and she has to stop every few blocks, and it's bigger if they bottom out. So the question is,
when they make it bigger, she bottoms out, and she's a right below knee amputee.
Okay. Did she say what kind of suspension she has or anything like that?
No.
No?
Just the socket's too tight, cutting off circulation. Needs to stop every few blocks when they're walking, and when they make it bigger, she bottoms out. You could just talk about suspension methods and, things to consider.
And managing fit.
Vacuum.
Oh, it's vacuum?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do vacuums usually work better than the pin socket?
So when it comes to different types of suspension, it's really what the limb can tolerate and what's going to work best for each individual.
Okay.
So the pin is going to start off as being something that's secure, but depending on limb shape, there's a lot of pressure, right? So you only have one attachment point to the socket, and so that point is pulling all of the tissue. And so if the limb is kind of more bulbous in shape, where it's a little bit bigger at the bottom compared to higher up, then that can cause even more kind of pressure and just milking of that tissue to not let the limb kind of settle into shape. So suction is where you use a liner or a fitting sock, and then you have some sort of sleeve that creates a seal on the thigh, and there's air that gets pushed out of the system. But that then creates kind of more uniform pressure. So instead of just having that pressure at the bottom, now across the whole limb you have contact, so it more evenly distributes the forces for the suspension. And then vacuum actively draws air out. For a lot of newer amputees, so vacuum, depending on skin sensitivity, if there's been skin grafts, all of that the pressure and that negative pressure kind of drawing down into the socket can be really hard for people to tolerate, just because the skin remains so sensitive. So it's usually a progression of kind of going from suction and then moving into vacuum, and even at that jump of if you try somebody in vacuum and they're just like, nope, this is too much, then all right, we'll go back down to suction suspension. Do you want to talk a little bit about socket fit and...
So she also said she's tried pin, and pin never worked. And she's tried click technology, but that didn't work as well.
Click, so the adjustable.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I would say if she maybe tried suction again, just to see if the vacuum might be pulling too much, and then that's what's making it feel like she's bottoming out, because it's just pulling all the tissue to the bottom. But it's just hard to say without seeing her limb, like how exactly the socket's fitting. Because you want uniform pressure throughout the socket and not just at the top where she would feel that choke or feel the pressure like it's cutting circulation off. And then if there's not enough pressure everywhere, then yeah, you're gonna bottom right out. So I would say, yeah, like I definitely would say try the suction option instead of the vacuum, just to see if maybe the vacuum is too powerful for her skin to be used to.
And also, when they're enlarging the socket, how much are they opening things up by? Is it just a small kind of incremental change of trying to let that tissue settle in and not have so much of that significant of, all right, we opened this up a few sock ply, so now you're sinking down in the bottom. But how much of that can also be managed by fitting socks? So if it is opened up, if you try adding a little pad or adding a fitting sock, does that help lift you up off of the bottom just a little bit to not get so much impact?
They haven't responded yet to that, but they did say that the main pressure is towards the back.
Okay, and that can be...
And she said it was a sliver of a nylon larger, and she'd still bottom out.
Wow.
Interesting.
Maybe the socket fitting.
So it's a socket fit, and if it's that choking sensation, like it's cutting off circulation, so if you're active and stuff of just that muscle belly, of having something for that muscle belly to kind of compress and expand into, because a lot of it, kind of taking some of those measurements and looking at limb shape of the limb kind of at rest versus if you contract those muscles and tighten everything up, of how much the shape changes. But that's a very slight difference in terms of socket volume.
Right.
She said it is choking feeling.
Yeah.
Okay. And so some of that with activity, so as that muscle starts to kind of demand a little bit more energy, there's a little bit more blood flow. That's something that, I mean, we do have patients report of if they've been in a period of not being as active and then they start walking more vigorously, running a little bit, that kind of building up, they're like, yeah, like I feel like it just gets that choking. So it's the same thing of like, if you went in and you're getting blood drawn, right, and they put a tourniquet on your arm and you're trying to flex against it, then that muscle is going to get really achy because it's not getting the blood supply that it needs. It's the same thing that can happen in the socket of just making sure there's just a little bit more room for that muscle belly, especially if it's back towards the back of the calf, to help tissue kind of settle in and have just a little bit of room of maybe not overall throughout the whole volume of the socket, but just a little bit kind of through the popliteal region or the back of the calf to give a little bit more room for that muscle belly.
Solid advice. So how would you, like, if they were gonna ask prosthetist, just like a quick summary, how would you recommend they advocate for that?
So talking to your prosthetist with that, I mean, I would bring it up of describing the sensation as that of I feel like it's not choking off everywhere, but more of that pressure through the back of the calf. And then maybe asking them of, hey, what do you think about opening it up just a little bit here? And if you can grind away just a little bit of that material, it can be, I mean, just a little fine little adjustment of do a little bit at a time. And then from there of do a little bit, see if that helps, do a little bit more instead of trying to heat and push things out or really make kind of a bigger change. If that nylon made that big of a difference, then just trying to do a little bit more to give just a little bit more breathing room for that muscle belly to contract. So the follow-up was without changing the volume of the socket. So, yep, not expanding the socket, but just maybe. So your prosthetist should be able to kind of grind and shape things in the back of the socket just a little bit to give a little bit more room instead of expanding the overall socket volume by a nylon. So that way it's kind of a more localized relief instead of global throughout the entire socket volume.